The king who called himself a god. A story of pride, downfall, and redemption, inspired by the book of Daniel. He ruled the greatest empire on earth. His word could build cities or destroy nations. Yet one day, in a single breath, everything he built vanished, and the man who called himself a god became like a beast of the field. This is not just a story about an ancient king. It's a story about the human heart, about pride, blindness, and the mercy of a God who humbles the mighty so they can see again. Part 1, the Golden City and the Rising Pride. Long before our time in the land of Babylon, there stood a kingdom so magnificent that travelers from distant lands could see its light from miles away. Massive walls stretched across the horizon, covered with blue glazed tiles that shimmered under the sun. Towering ziggurats pierced the clouds. Gardens hung high in the air, watered by secret rivers. It was said that Babylon was heaven built on earth. At the center of it all sat King Nebuchadnezzar, the man who made Babylon shine like gold. He was not an ordinary king. He was a conqueror, a builder, a dreamer, and to his people, almost a god. Everywhere his eyes turned, his power was visible. He had defeated armies from Egypt to Judah. He had captured kings, taken treasures, and brought the best of every nation into his own palace. Even the holy temple of Jerusalem had fallen before his armies, and the sacred vessels once used in worship to the God of Israel were now sitting inside his royal halls as trophies of his triumph. But victory, wealth, and praise are dangerous companions. They whisper lies into the soul. They say, "You did this. You are unstoppable." And slowly, without noticing, the heart begins to bow, not to God, but to itself, the beginning of pride. One morning, as the sun painted Babylon in gold, Nebuchadnezzar walked on the rooftop of his palace. The air was still, the city quiet. He looked down upon the streets filled with merchants, the temples gleaming in the distance, and said to himself, "Is not this the great Babylon that I have built by my mighty power, for the glory of my majesty?" It was a simple sentence, yet in heaven it thundered like a challenge, because those who raise themselves above the Creator must one day be reminded of who truly rules the heavens and the earth. Part 2, the dream and the warning. Before this moment of arrogance, the king had already been warned. God had sent him a dream, a strange, terrifying vision. In the dream, he saw a great tree standing in the middle of the earth. Its top reached the heavens, and its leaves provided shade for all creatures. Birds built nests in its branches, beasts rested beneath it, and the world was fed from its fruit. But suddenly, from the sky came a voice, clear and powerful. "Cut down the tree, strip off its branches, scatter its fruit, yet leave the stump and roots bound with iron and bronze. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let his mind be changed from that of a man to that of a beast, until 7 times pass over him." The king woke up trembling. None of his magicians or wise men could explain the dream. So he called for Daniel, a man filled with the Spirit of God, a captive from Judah, who had already interpreted the king's dreams before. When Daniel heard the vision, he became silent. His face turned pale. And the king asked, "Do not be afraid. Tell me what it means." Daniel bowed his head and said gently, "My lord, may this dream be for your enemies. But the tree that you saw, that is you, O king. You have grown strong, and your greatness reaches to heaven. But because your heart has been lifted up, the Most High has decreed that you will be driven away from men. You will live among the beasts of the field and eat grass like an ox, until you learn that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of men and gives them to anyone he chooses." Daniel pleaded, "Therefore, O king, be humble. Turn from your sins and do what is right. Show mercy to the poor. Perhaps God will yet prolong your prosperity." For a moment, the great king listened. His heart was troubled, but not enough to change. Part 3, the fall of the king. A year passed. The warnings faded like old echoes. The gardens bloomed brighter than ever. The palace halls were filled with music, dancers, and feasts. And once again, Nebuchadnezzar climbed onto his rooftop. He looked over the vast city, towers, walls, temples, all shining in the morning sun. Pride rose within him like fire. He stretched his arms wide and declared, Is not this the great Babylon I have built by my power and for my glory? And before his words had even faded, a voice from heaven thundered through the air. O King Nebuchadnezzar, your kingdom has been taken from you. You will live with the beasts of the field until you learn that the Most High rules over all the kingdoms of men. Suddenly, madness filled his mind. His servant screamed as the mighty king fell to his knees. His eyes turned wild. He fled from the palace, tearing away his royal robes, running into the wilderness. For 7 long years, Nebuchadnezzar wandered among the fields. He slept under the open sky, drenched in the dew of heaven. His hair grew long like eagle's feathers, his nails like claws. He ate grass like an animal, forgotten by the world he once ruled. The golden throne of Babylon stood empty. The most powerful man on earth had become the lowest of creatures. But sometimes the lowest place is the only place where the soul can finally look upward. Part 4. Redemption in the Wilderness. Then one night, under a quiet sky filled with stars, something changed. Nebuchadnezzar lifted his head toward heaven for the first time in years and whispered a prayer. No crown, no gold, no audience, only a broken man and the God he had ignored. And in that moment, his sanity returned. The chains in his mind fell away. He fell to his knees and wept, saying, "Now I know that the Most High rules over all. His kingdom is everlasting, and his dominion endures from generation to generation." When he returned to his palace, his advisors were astonished. They restored him to his throne, and his kingdom became even greater than before. But this time, the king was different. Gone was the arrogance. Gone was the pride. In its place was a heart that had learned to bow. Nebuchadnezzar proclaimed throughout the empire, "I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt the King of heaven, for all his works are truth and his ways are just. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble." Part 5. The lesson that never fades. Centuries have passed since Babylon's towers crumbled into dust, but the message of that ancient king still speaks today. Because pride hasn't disappeared, it still whispers the same lie. You don't need God. You are enough. And yet, every generation eventually learns what Nebuchadnezzar learned, that power fades, wealth fades, beauty fades, but the soul remains. It was never meant to rule without its maker. Sometimes, God humbles us not to destroy us, but to restore us. He lets us fall, so we can finally look up. And in that moment, when a proud heart becomes a humble one, heaven smiles, and a new kind of kingdom begins. The kingdom within. The body, the fall and the fire of mercy. The great city still glowed beneath the sun, and its walls still whispered the name of Nebuchadnezzar. But in heaven, the decision had already been made. The time had come for the king to learn, not through words, not through prophecy, but through experience, what it means to be human before God. Part 1. The Dream Revisited. After Daniel's warning, months passed quietly. The king ruled, conquered, built, and for a while it seemed as though he had changed. He gave to the poor, spoke with kindness, and even praised the God of Daniel in public gatherings. But pride, when only silenced and not uprooted, grows back like a vine beneath the soil. In the nights that followed, the dream returned. Sometimes it came in whispers, a faint echo of the tree being cut down. Other times it roared through his sleep, "Cut it down! Cut it down!" Nebuchadnezzar would wake drenched in sweat, his heart pounding. He would walk to his balcony, stare at the stars, and tell himself it was only a dream. But deep down he knew it was a warning he refused to heed. In the palace, Daniel continued to serve faithfully. He prayed often for the king, hoping mercy might still find him. Yet even Daniel could sense the shifting wind, the rise of vanity, once more in the royal court. Part 2. The Gods of Gold and Glory. Babylon had become a furnace of worship, not of heaven, but of men. Statues of gold lined the streets, each bearing the likeness of the king. Priests offered incense to his image, and choirs sang hymns not to God, but to Nebuchadnezzar himself. It was in those days that Daniel's 3 companions, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, had refused to bow to the golden idol. The fiery furnace burned that day, but the men of God stood untouched, their clothes unburned, their faith unshaken. And though the king had bowed before the miracle, the lesson did not stay within his heart for long. He still believed in the God of Daniel, but only as one among many gods. He could acknowledge heaven's power, but not surrender his own. Pride does not always shout. Sometimes it smiles while pretending to worship. Part 3. The Morning of Judgment. Then came that fateful morning. It was bright, calm, and almost ordinary, the kind of day that gives no sign of what is about to unfold. Nebuchadnezzar stood once again on the roof of his palace. The city shimmered below him, blue glazed gates, terrace gardens, the Euphrates flowing like silver to the heart of Babylon. He spread his arms wide and said aloud, almost in a whisper of self-admiration, "Is not this the great Babylon I have built by my power and for my glory?" The last word had barely left his lips when the sky grew heavy. The sunlight dimmed, and from above came a voice that shook the stones beneath his feet. "O Nebuchadnezzar, the kingdom has departed from you. You shall live among the beasts of the field until you learn that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of men." Before the echo faded, madness fell upon him. The king clutched his head, his crown slipping to the ground. He stumbled, gasping for air. Servants ran toward him, but he pushed them away wild-eyed, crying out words no one could understand. The gates of the palace opened, and the once mighty ruler fled into the wilderness, barefoot, broken, nameless. Part 4. The 7 Years of Shadow. The world forgot him. Whispers spread that the king had died or been cursed by the gods. But in truth, Nebuchadnezzar lived, though not as a man anymore. He roamed the fields beyond Babylon, his body covered in dew each morning. He slept under trees, ate wild grass, and howled at the moon. His hair grew long like eagle feathers, his nails curved like claws. The once golden robe was now replaced by rags and dirt. No army guarded him. No servant bowed before him. Only the wind and the beasts kept him company. Yet even in his madness, God's mercy was working quietly, because sometimes the greatest healing begins in the darkest wilderness. In those years of shadow, Nebuchadnezzar began to see the world differently. He saw the beauty of the dawn, not as a ruler, but as a creature. He watched the rain fall and realized it did not fall because of his command. He saw the stars and understood they shone without his permission. Day after day, his mind slowly cleared, and in that stillness, he began to remember the words of Daniel. Until you learn that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of men. And finally, one night, under a sky full of stars, the king, now nothing more than a man, lifted his eyes and whispered the first prayer of his life. Part 5. The Return of Reason. When Nebuchadnezzar opened his eyes the next morning, the world was the same, and yet everything had changed. For the first time in 7 years, he could think clearly. The fog was gone. The madness had left him. He rose from the ground, his knees weak, but his heart steady. The sky seemed bluer, the air softer, and though his clothes were torn and his body frail, his soul felt lighter than it had ever been. He fell to his knees and said, "I bless the Most High, and praise and honor him who lives forever. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are nothing before him. He does according to his will in the armies of heaven and among the people of earth, and no one can say to him, 'What have you done?'" And as he spoke those words, something miraculous happened. A wind stirred the fields, carrying the scent of rain. A golden light broke through the clouds, and in that divine moment, the king was restored. Part 6. The Return to Babylon. When Nebuchadnezzar returned to the city, few believed their eyes. The king who had vanished into madness had come back, but not as before. He entered the gates not on a chariot, but walking barefoot, with humility in his step and gratitude in his gaze. His counselors gathered, stunned, and slowly knelt before him, not because of fear, but out of awe. The royal robe was placed on his shoulders again. The golden crown returned to his head. But when they lifted a mirror before him, he only smiled softly. He no longer saw God. He saw a man forgiven and alive. He rebuilt his throne room, not with images of himself, but with words of praise. He ordered that the poor be fed, the widows protected, and the orphans cared for. And on the walls of his palace, he He inscribed a new decree. There is only one king above all kings, and his name is not Nebuchadnezzar. From that day forward, the king who once called himself a god became a witness of God's mercy. Part 7. The legacy of the king who learned to bow. The years passed peacefully after that. Nebuchadnezzar ruled with wisdom and gentleness, never forgetting where he had been found. Every morning, he would step onto the palace balcony, not to admire the city, but to lift his hands toward heaven and thank the Lord for another day. And when travelers came to Babylon, expecting to meet a proud ruler, they found instead a man who spoke softly about the greatness of God. He told them of his dream. He told them of his madness. He told them of the moment he looked to the sky and found grace waiting there. Many wept at his words, because in his story, they saw their own reflection, the struggle between pride and humility, between self and surrender. And so, the once mighty king of Babylon became a teacher of humility. His throne turned into a pulpit, his power transformed into testimony. His final words, recorded by his scribes, were not about conquest, gold, or glory, but about the mercy that finds us when we finally lift our eyes. Part 8. The Eternal Message. Centuries later, when Babylon fell and its towers turned to dust, the words of Nebuchadnezzar remained. They echo still in every age and every heart. Those who walk in pride, he is able to humble. The story of the king who became a beast and rose again as a believer is not just ancient history. It is a mirror, showing us what happens when human greatness forgets divine grace. But it is also a promise that even in the wilderness of our failures, God's hand still reaches down to restore what pride has destroyed. And that is the beauty of mercy. It meets us not when we stand tallest, but when we finally bow low enough to see heaven. The hidden journey of Jesus and his disciples. Part 3, the Revelation, and that is where our next chapter begins. The evening wind swept softly across the valley of olive trees, carried with them whispers of everything that had been, the laughter of the disciples, the murmur of prayers, the echoes of miracles. Jesus stood upon the hill, his robe catching the faint shimmer of the moonlight, his gaze fixed on the horizon where darkness met the promise of dawn. The disciples gathered around him, their hearts torn between awe and fear. They walked miles together, through hunger and storms, through crowds that praised and mobs that cursed. But now, something was changing. The journey that once seemed endless was drawing towards divine purpose. "Do not be afraid," Jesus said gently, his eyes filled with a peace the world could never give. "For what is hidden shall be revealed, and what is lost shall be found again." Those words lingered like music in the air, wrapping around their hearts with both comfort and mystery. The silent night before the storm. That night was quieter than any before. The disciples sat by the fire, their faces illuminated by flickering light. Peter sharpened his knife absent-mindedly. Thomas gazed into the flames, and John leaned against a rock, lost in thought. They knew, somehow, that a great change was coming. Jesus prayed apart from them, under the shadow of ancient trees. His voice trembled not in fear, but in surrender. "Father, if it be thy will, let this cup pass from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." He wept, not for himself, but for humanity, for every soul that would wander lost in the centuries to come, searching for light in a world that so often chose the dark. And in that moment, heaven wept with him. The betrayal, the sound of footsteps broke the night. Torches flickered in the distance, shadows moving with purpose. Judas stepped forward, his eyes dimmed by guilt, yet hardened by what he had chosen. He kissed the teacher's cheek, and history shifted forever. The soldiers moved swiftly, binding the hands that once healed the blind and lifted the broken. The disciples scattered in fear, their faith trembling like leaves in storm. And Jesus, he said nothing. He simply looked toward Judas, with eyes full of sorrow and love. Even in betrayal, he saw redemption waiting. Even in the fall, he saw the seed of salvation, the road to the cross. The road was long, and the air heavy with cruelty. Crowds jeered, soldiers mocked. Yet among the noise, there was silence, the silence of purpose. Every step was a choice, every wound a message written in pain and love. The disciples, hiding in the shadows, watched in anguish. Peter wept bitterly, remembering the words, "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." John stayed close to Mary, the mother whose tears spoke more than words ever could. When the sky turned black at noon and the earth trembled beneath the weight of sin, the world seemed to hold its breath. From the cross, his final words pierced eternity. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And then silence. But heaven was not silent. The dawn of resurrection. 3 days passed. The world thought it was over. Hope lay buried beneath stone and shadow. Then, at dawn, light broke through. The stone was rolled away, not by human hands, but by the breath of heaven itself. Mary Magdalene, trembling, approached the tomb. She saw no body, only the cloth, folded neatly, as if the story had simply paused. Then she heard the voice, gentle, familiar, alive. "Mary." She turned, and the impossible became truth. Life had conquered death. The teacher had returned. When the disciples saw him again, they could scarcely believe it. But when he broke bread with them, when he smiled and said, "Peace be with you," every doubt dissolved into joy. The hidden journey was never about death. It was about transformation, a passage from despair to hope, from fear to faith, from darkness to divine light. The Great Commission. On the mountain where it all began, Jesus stood once more before his disciples. But this time, the fear was gone. In its place was purpose, radiant, unstoppable. "Go," he said, "into all nations. Teach them what I have shown you. Love as I have loved you." The wind stirred the olive branches. The sky blazed with gold. And though he ascended, leaving only his promise behind, they knew he was not gone. He had simply gone ahead. The hidden journey was never meant to end. It was meant to continue. Through them, through us, through every heart that dares to believe. The echo of eternity. Centuries have passed, yet his voice still echoes. In every act of kindness, in every tear of forgiveness, in every heart that finds its way home, the journey continues. The disciples once walked dusty roads to follow him. Today, our roads may be digital, emotional, spiritual, but the call remains the same. Follow me. It's a call to let go of what chains us, to forgive those who've hurt us, to see light even in the darkest valley. Because the hidden journey is not only his story, it's ours. And perhaps, in following his footsteps, we discover that the kingdom of God was never distant. It was always within us. The final light. As the sun sets over Jerusalem and the stars rise one by one, imagine standing where they once stood. Peter, John, Mary, Thomas, their eyes lifted toward heaven, hearts burning with new faith. They did not have answers. They did not have certainty. But they had him, and that was enough. So when your own road feels heavy, when your faith trembles, remember, the same hands that calm the seas still hold you now. The same voice that said, "Peace, be still," still whispers your name in the quiet of your heart. The journey of Jesus and his disciples didn't end 2,000 years ago. It began, and it's waiting for you to walk it, too. Herb closing voice for YouTube outro. If this story has touched your heart, pause for a moment, breathe, and ask yourself, where is your hidden journey leading you? If you seek truth, keep walking. If you feel lost, remember, light always finds the humble. And if you ever doubt that you are loved, look to the cross, and you'll know you always were. This is not the end of the story. It's only the beginning again.